Hi people, hope you're all well. It's been a few days since I've made a video. There's a lot going on in the news at the moment. The deadly cyclone that hits the French territory of Mayotte, possibly hundreds missing in that disaster. The revelation of mass graves in Syria, a damning indictment of Assad's regime. Um, and there's a lot of other stuff going on at the moment. But for this video, I want to focus on the China espionage claims in the UK. And without further ado, I'm just going to read out the BBC report on this, as I always do. I always read out the report just to give some background context, and then give my thoughts on it. But if you don't want to watch the whole video, I'm just going to put my cards on the table here. I think the Starmer government, like its predecessors, still doesn't get this. It still doesn't get that China cannot be trusted. I mean, any new government's going to try to get up trade deals. Any new government's going to focus on the economy. That's understandable. Every government wants economic growth, but it shouldn't be at the price of compromising national security. Um, and I think we just give China far too much ground. There's another thing at the moment, actually, it's not in this report that I'm going to read out, but the issue of the potential new embassy. Tower Hamlets Council in London has rejected China's application, but central government can override that potentially. I give Tower Hamlets Council credit for that um, because China has to understand that it can't just have everything at once. And having a massive embassy right in the heart of London, it just opens up the potential of even greater espionage. We cannot allow Beijing to just buy up those countries. We cannot allow our national security to be compromised by Chinese investment or Chinese infiltration, frankly, because it's just I mean, I find it very frustrating because the security services have been warning about this for years, and successive governments, Labour and Tory, both parties are guilty of this, um, have been pandering to China. It's really frustrating. Anyway, without further ado, this is a report. It's from 2 days ago, and it's by Becky Morton, the BBC's political reporter, um, or a political reporter on the BBC, I should say. The Chinese embassy has told the UK to stop creating trouble after a businessman accused of being a spy for China was banned from the country. The revelations about Yang Tengbo, who denies wrongdoing and his links to Prince Andrew, have sparked renewed calls for the UK to designate China a threat to national security. The issue poses a dilemma for the government, which is hoping to strengthen ties with China to help boost economic growth and tackle shared issues like climate change. In the House of Commons on Monday, a number of senior Conservatives called for tougher measures to protect the UK against covert Chinese influence. The government is committed to introducing a foreign influence registration scheme next summer after the previous Conservative government legislated for it. It would require individuals and organisations acting for a foreign power to declare any political lobbying. The scheme will have two tiers, with countries specified in the enhanced tier requiring the registration of a wider range of activities where this is necessary to protect the safety interests of the UK. But its implications have been delayed, with the measures now due to take effect from next summer. Conservative former Home Secretary Suella Braverman claimed the scheme was ready to go at the time of July's general election and was among several Tory MPs to call for China to be placed in the enhanced tier. Meanwhile, former Security Minister Tom Tugendhat said MI5 had advised the scheme was not worth having if China was not in the enhanced tier. Ex-Tory leader Sir Ian Duncan Smith, who like Tugendhat has been sanctioned by China and is one of the country's most vocal critics, said there should be no more delay in implementing the scheme. He said Mr Yang was not a lone wolf, but one of thousands of individuals who penetrated UK institutions. When the party was in government, the Conservatives were divided over whether to designate China a security threat. And this is my interjection. Boris Johnson flip-flopped on that issue. He was tough on China one day, soft on China the next. Johnson was a complete flip-flopper on this issue. Paris had introduced a foreign influence registration scheme were part of laws passed in July 2023, but one had not been brought in by the time of the general election a year later. Speaking on Monday, Security Minister Dan Jarvis insisted the scheme was not ready when Labour took office and the government was now planning to introduce the regulations to Parliament in the new year ahead of its summer launch. However, he refused to confirm whether China would be in the enhanced tier, only saying that decisions would be based on robust security and intelligence analysis. Such a move would likely provoke a backlash from China at a time when the UK government is seeking a more stable relationship. Last month, Sir Keir Starmer met Xi Jinping on the fringes of the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro. The first time UK Prime Ministers met the Chinese leader in person since 2018. Chancellor Rachel Reeves is also due to visit Beijing next year to discuss economic cooperation with her Chinese counterpart. It comes after a period of strained relations between the two countries, with tensions over issues including China's treatment of the Uyghur minority group in Xinjiang and pro-democracy activists in Hong Kong, including incidentally a British citizen, Jimmy Lai. On Monday, Sir Keir said he was concerned about the challenge posed by China, but repeated the government's position that it was necessary to cooperate on issues like trade, climate change, and human rights, as if China is going to cooperate with us on that last point. As one of the UK's biggest trading partners, any souring of relations with China could impact the government's goal of boosting economic growth at home. Banks, including HSBC and Standard Chartered, reportedly raised concerns privately about the potential of impact of including China in the enhanced tier. According to Bloomberg, executives fear this could impede business and trigger negative publicity if they are forced to declare activity. China strongly denied claims of espionage and accused some MPs of trying to smear the country. But on Tuesday, UK judges issued another ruling on an on an alleged Chinese agent, Christian, excuse me, on, I'll read that again. But on Tuesday, UK judges issued another ruling on an alleged Chinese agent, Christine Lee, upholding a decision by MI5 to warn she had infiltrated Parliament, with a decision on whether to designate China a threat to national security looming. The ongoing row could further damage the UK's attempt to repair relations. Christine Lee had been embedded as a successful lawyer in Birmingham for years. She had a legal practice there, and she was infiltrating all that time. Here's the thing I find really galling. China's attitude speaks for itself. Um, has told the Chinese embassy has told the UK to stop creating trouble. Now you'd expect them to defend themselves. You'd expect them to deny the allegations, but stop creating trouble, talking to us like we're a naughty child. This is the attitude the Chinese have to this country, and I think Starmer is weak on China. Um, I so far I've been impressed by Starmer and Lamy regarding Russia. I think they've struck all the right notes. They've continued to support Ukraine. They've spoken out. But this idea of being cautious with China, it's infuriating because no matter what is revealed in this country, they still take this attitude that we need to respect Beijing. Well, respect should be a two-way street. And I think when China lashes out, that shows what they really think of this country. Now, like I say, I expect them to defend themselves. And Mr. Tangbo, of course, is going to say he's innocent. There may be a distant possibility that he actually is. I don't believe it, though. I think that China will do absolutely everything it can to undermine Western security. Um, there's just so much evidence for it. And yes, we cannot just cut off all links with China. I understand that. But if it's a price of getting trade agreements with China versus national security, that should be a no-brainer. I mean, China's a major economy. It's the second biggest economy in the world. But you know what? There's a lot of other countries we could be securing trade links with. Will offset, that will balance out, um, having souring of relations to Chinese trade. We could be doing trade deals with a lot of countries. We could be doing trade deals with Vietnam, with the Philippines, with Mexico, with Brazil, with Indonesia, and individually they may not compete with China, but collectively, we should be really looking at that. This over reliance on China, I've got a big problem with. And Keir Starmer, just like his predecessors, Rishi Sunak spoke tough on China, and when it came to it, when he was Prime Minister, his government was weak. James Cleverly, just like Keir Starmer, was far too cautious. Um, Starmer did raise the human rights issue at the G20 summit, and I remember seeing, you know, press attaches, or not press attaches actually, there would have been um, kind of security or dignitaries around Xi Jinping. They were actually trying to shoo away British reporters. Now, this was not in China. This was in Brazil. So that just shows their contempt for scrutiny. It just shows that they don't like any outside scrutiny. The fact that Keir Starmer was asking those questions, they give him credit for asking those questions. He did raise the issue of Jimmy Lai at that meeting, but it's just the same attitude from every British government, no matter what the security services say. They always take the same attitude. Oh, we need to work together with China. We better not upset them. I'm sick and tired of, frankly, the spinelessness when it comes to Beijing. It's just it's they're not seeming to understand the problem here. We cannot trust China. Um, Prince Andrew once again has questions to answer. I think it's yet another example of him being too cozy with people he should not be cozy with. Frankly, Prince Andrew's an embarrassment to the king, to this country, because he doesn't know clearly the people he chooses to associate with. Now, Andrew has said that he hasn't given away any state secrets or any sensitive information. Um, it's just very frustrating because I feel like China's taking this country for a ride. I feel that China sees Britain as a soft touch, and Keir Starmer is enabling that by giving China the idea that it can get what it wants. If they don't put China in this higher tier next year, then it would absolutely show that Keir Starmer's government is completely weak when it comes to Beijing. And I think the Tories would be justified in hammering him on that. I think Starmer should really, really face a lot of pressure on that issue. If he doesn't recognize that China needs to be taken seriously as an external threat, then um, he's either being incredibly gullible or worse, he's just choosing to ignore the issue. It's all very well raising human rights concerns, but even if you want to dismiss that, some people will say we've no right to talk about human rights since we're arming Israel. Well, even if you take that view, then let's look at the national security perspective. Even if you want to ignore the human rights issue, there's a very real national security risk here. And I think for too damn long, we've seen Chinese nationals in this country, and I'm not generalizing here, but I'm talking about individuals like Christine Lee and, for example, those Chinese students who were harassing the musician Brendan Kavanagh, um, acting with impunity. It's infuriating. Why is it we are constantly? I mean, where's our pride? Where's our sense of national integrity? I honestly think successive British governments are scared of China. They act scared of China. They act super cautious. I want to see a British Prime Minister who actually stands up to China and says, no, we're not going to tolerate this. We are going to close the Confucius Institute. We take spying very seriously. And if you say that we're creating trouble, that's a statement of disrespect. I would publicly say to the Chinese, respect is a two-way street. You demand respect, well, so do we. I mean, it's what I cannot abide is this ultra cautious approach that we take with the Chinese. It's just pathetic. And I'm not suggesting that we cut off all links. That isn't realistic. I don't think it's realistic when China is the second biggest economy in the world. There will be some areas that we may need to work with the Chinese on. For example, if we had British tourists who got into trouble in China, if we cut off all links, then there'd be no sort of negotiating platform. So issues like that, that's why I don't say we should cut off all links. But what we should be doing is sending out the message that China cannot get everything it wants. I mean, this is a regime that threatened to destroy the Australian wine industry. Why? because Canberra had called for an independent inquiry into COVID. And I don't think it should be forgotten that China's attitude to COVID was initially to cover it up, punish the whistleblowers. I believe had China taken that seriously at the very beginning, if they'd listened to those scientists, they could have contained it. They could have contained it as a localized outbreak. Instead, their attitude was to punish the whistleblowers, and then it became a worldwide pandemic. And as far as I'm concerned, the whole world paid the price for the Communist Party's secretive nature, for their face saving rather than taking it seriously as a public health threat. And the thing is, Australia didn't even directly blame China. They simply called for an independent inquiry. Um, Keir Starmer needs to be a lot tougher. He needs to stop being so weak when it comes to China. He needs to be more outspoken. I don't see this happening at all, but it's frankly infuriating. You know, we have British parliamentarians who are blacklisted by China. They're basically under threat by China. Keir Starmer still wants to make these overtures and pander to Beijing. It's a disgrace, and it's infuriating, quite honestly. Um, if Keir Starmer rolls out the red carpet for Xi Jinping, you know, invites him on a state visit whilst this sort of thing is going on, it would be an absolute disgrace. Now, I've defended Starmer in some areas. I think he is right to try and seek a reset with the European Union. I believe that's absolutely practical. Um, and I think we've much more practical getting a trade deal with France and Germany. And yes, the Commonwealth. One of the comments on my video about that was about the Commonwealth. Well, I totally welcome that. I favour trade deals with the Commonwealth as well. But, you know, we're not going to get an equal trade deal with the United States. And any trade with China, there is this risk that it comes with the price of selling out on our national security. No trade deal is worth that. I don't care what China offers. It's not worth compromising our national security. You know, they could offer infrastructure, they could offer, we know they've been involved in high speed rail deals. And I just think that successive governments have kind of viewed China as, well, we shouldn't provoke them. This spinelessness from British governments successively, it's it's infuriating. I have to say the only prime minister in recent years, and she's got a lot of slack in other areas with good reason, who has been consistent on China is Liz Truss. It's the one area I will say Liz Truss is right about. I am not a fan of Liz Truss. I don't like her pandering to Donald Trump. She's sort of pitching herself as the only conservative in the room. It's a little bit arrogant. But she is right about China. And she's been consistently right about China. I give her credit for that. Now, who knows, maybe had Truss had a longer premiership, she would have been just like all the other prime ministers of recent years and pandered to China. But we'll never know because she had a short premiership. Keir Starmer's doing it, Rishi Sunak done it, Boris Johnson done it, Theresa May done it. You know, when are we going to wake up and realise we cannot trust the CCP? What is it going to take? What is it going to take? How many more leaks are we going to find? How many more revelations are we going to see before this country wakes up and recognizes that China is an external threat? The Chinese regime is an external threat. And you know, people who are hostile to European students, I would just make this point. Individual Chinese students aren't a threat. However, there is a problem with Chinese students who are acting kind of as mini nationalists, this in the sense that they harass their peers. You know, they bully and threaten Hong Kongers, they bully and threaten even other Chinese students who would speak out. Do not underestimate the capabilities of Beijing using them as a sort of soft power, um, in a soft power way. I think that Chinese students who study in this country, quite frankly, um, most of them are fine. Most of them pay money to study here. Most of them just want to get on with it. Um, but I would say that any Chinese student who is disrespecting this country, engaging in a hostile nationalistic way, you know, threatening their peers, promoting the Chinese Communist Party, they should lose their visa immediately. They should not be here if that is what they're engaging in. Frankly, some of them do. That Brendan Kavanagh incident earlier this year, when one of those students basically yelled at the guy, it showed the sort of entitlement that a lot of them have. It showed the sort of thuggishness that come through with Chinese nationalism. We should not be tolerating Chinese nationalism on our shores. Um, Chinese students should be told, look, you've paid good money to be here. We want you to have a good experience. We want you to get your degree, etc., etc. If you behave in this aggressive nationalistic way, you'll lose your visa and you'll be thrown out of the country. That should be what they are. That should be the um, the caveat. It's just so infuriating that we continue to be a soft touch when it comes to China, and Beijing knows this. They are like typical bullies. They only understand the language of power. If we show weakness to China, they will lap it up. Give them an inch, they will take a mile. And I'm no xenophobe. I want to make this point very clear. I'm no xenophobe. I've lived and worked in China twice. There's a lot of things about Chinese culture I like. I personally had a good time there. And I'm not against individual Chinese people at all. But I am patriotic enough to see what is obvious. We cannot trust Beijing. Quarter of a million people died in this country as a result of COVID. We have elected parliamentarians who are basically on a hit list by Beijing. I'm not talking in the Putinist sense that they'll be assassinated, but so long as that atmosphere is there, why the hell should we be getting cozy with them? I think we should cooperate with Beijing where necessary, and that's it. What Keir Starmer's offering is just giving far too much ground, in my opinion. Um, and I do think, Kimmy Badenoch has to really hammer him on this point. I want Keir Starmer to be put under scrutiny. I want him to justify what his attitude is to these revelations. Will he be grilling his opposite number on this? Will he be unequivocally sending out a message that we're not going to tolerate it? Or is he going to be is he just going to pander to Xi Jinping? I am sick and tired of the thug regime in Beijing thinking it could do what it wants. And another barometer of this is going to be this embassy. If central government overrides Tower Hamlets and gives a green light for China to buy up this embassy, it will be yet another example of this Labour government being utterly weak when it comes to China. It's it's infuriating. Um, we need to get a lot tougher. We need to get a lot more assertive and a lot more outspoken. When the Chinese embassy barks about not to create trouble, we should throw it straight back at them and say, stop creating trouble then in our country. If you want us to stop creating trouble, then stop giving us reasons to create trouble, as they would put it. And even talking about this, I'm finding myself getting quite aggravated because I see it. I see the obvious. So my message to Keir Starmer and David Lammy is when it comes to China, wake up. Wake up. Let's have whatever cooperation is necessary on climate change, on limited trade. This idea that we should be overly reliant on China, it's ridiculous. It's setting it up to be used. It's setting us up into a position where their trade is so integrated to this country that we better not upset them. That is a spineless position for a government to take. Spineless. And if this continues, it will have to be said that Keir Starmer is putting trade over national security. If I had one question for the Prime Minister, I would say, Mr. Starmer, why are you putting trade over national security? Trade's important, but I don't think it's more important than national security. Never will be, because there's 199 other countries in the world that we could do trade with. Well, we'll narrow that down. We're not going to do trade with Russia, North Korea. I was going to say Syria. Assad's gone now. On that point, briefly, Starmer's right to say that it's too early to redesignate the HST group, but we'll see. We'll see what pans out in Syria. some very grim revelations coming out of that country with Assad's prisons. Anyway, I'll wrap this up. Um, but I wouldn't say I'm disappointed in Labour because it's pretty much what I expected. Successive British governments have done this. I want to see a British government that has backbone on China for once, because there's only a handful of politicians in this country that have really stuck their neck out. I'll give Dominic Raab his due. When he was Foreign Secretary, he did recall the Chinese ambassador to explain himself regarding the events in Hong Kong. David Lammy's been very outspoken with Russia, so I hope he's consistent and is equally outspoken when it comes to China.